Climate change is the biggest threat facing humanity. Despite all the talk about reducing emissions, planting trees, and switching to the renewable energy, we have to admit that we've already lost battle against climate change. You might think that that's a bold statement, but hear me out. First, let's look at the numbers. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, the Earth's temperature has risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times, and the past decade was the hottest on record. The world is already feeling the effects of climate change, from melting ice caps to rising sea levels, and from extreme weather events to devastating wildfires. And this is just the beginning. Let's dive into the actions that we've taken to combat climate change. Sure, there have been some positive steps, like the Paris Agreement, where countries pledged to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. However, the reality is that these pledges are not enough. Even if all of the countries meet their emission reduction targets, we will still fall short of the 2 degrees Celsius target. The sad truth is that we've had ample warning about the dangers of climate change, but we failed to act. For decades, scientists have warned us about the impact of greenhouse gases on the planet, but we've been slow to listen and even slower to act. Politicians have prioritized economic growth over environmental protection, and corporations have put profits ahead of the planet. And it's not just the developed world that's to blame. Developing countries like China and India are rapidly industrializing, and their carbon emissions are skyrocketing. It's understandable that these countries want to improve the standard of living, but at what cost to the planet? So, what can we do now? The reality is that we can't undo the damage that's already been done. The best we can do is try to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. That means reducing emissions, investing in renewable energy, and adapting to the changing climate. We need to make significant changes to our way of life, and fast. But here's the thing, we can't rely on governments or corporations to take action. We all need to take responsibility for our actions and make changes in our own lives. That means driving less, eating less meat, using less energy, and consuming less in general. It's not easy, but it's necessary to prevent the worst effects of climate change. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're in a boat and you notice there's a hole in the bottom. You start bailing out the water with a bucket, but the water just keeps coming in faster and faster than you can bail it out. At this point, you have a choice. You can keep bailing, even though you know it's not going to be enough, or you can try to patch the hole. We are in the same situation with climate change. We can keep reducing our emissions and planting trees, but more is needed to prevent the worst effects of climate change. We need to patch the hole. That means developing new technologies to remove carbon from the atmosphere, investing in green infrastructure, and changing our economic system to prioritize sustainability over growth. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the scale of the climate crisis, remember that every action, no matter how small, can make a difference. Whether it's reducing your carbon footprint, supporting renewable energy, or advocating for climate policies, there are so many ways to get involved. It's going to take a lot of work, but we have no choice. The alternative is the world that's unrecognizable, where extreme weather events are the norm, where millions of people are displaced by rising sea levels, and where ecosystems are destroyed. We owe it to ourselves, our children, and future generations to take action now. We have picked all actions that you need to take, so let's discuss them one by one. We need to address the root causes of climate change, which include not only carbon emissions but also deforestation, soil degradation, and the use of fossil fuels. This requires a holistic approach that takes into account the entire ecosystem and the interconnectedness of all living things. We need to prioritize climate justice, which means ensuring that the burden of climate change doesn't fall disproportionately on marginalized communities. This includes indigenous peoples, people of color, low-income communities, and those living in the global south. We need to invest in renewable energy and phase out fossil fuels. This requires a concerted effort from governments, corporations, and individuals alike. We need to transition to a low-carbon economy that's based on renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and geothermal power. We need to rethink our relationship with nature. We can no longer treat the natural world as a commodity to be exploited for profit. We need to recognize the intrinsic value of nature and work to protect it for its own sake. We need to educate ourselves and others about the dangers of climate change and the steps that we can take to mitigate it. This includes not only formal education in schools, but also informal education through social media, community groups, and other channels. We need to collaborate across borders and sectors to tackle climate change. Climate change is a global problem that requires a global solution. We need to work together as a global community to find solutions for everyone. We need to reduce our consumption of meat and dairy products. Livestock production is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, as well as deforestation and water pollution. By reducing our meat and dairy consumption, we can not only reduce our carbon footprint, but also improve our health and help protect natural ecosystems. We need to invest in carbon capture technologies. These technologies can help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it underground or in other long-term storage solutions. While these technologies are still in their infancy, they might have the potential to play a significant role in mitigating climate change. We need to work with businesses and corporations to adopt sustainable practices. This includes everything from reducing their carbon emissions to minimizing waste and reducing water usage. By working with businesses, we can help drive systemic change and create a more sustainable future. We need to address the link between climate change and human rights. As climate change worsens, it's likely to exacerbate existing inequalities and leads to new human rights violations. We need to work to protect the rights of those most affected by climate change, including indigenous peoples, women, and children. We need to support climate-friendly policies and politicians. This includes supporting policies that reduce carbon emissions, protect natural ecosystems, and promote sustainable development. We also need to elect politicians who prioritize climate action and are willing to take bold steps to address the crisis. Does the idea of losing the battle against climate change feel all too familiar to you? It's a daunting and often overwhelming problem that can leave us feeling helpless and defeated. So, I want to ask you, what do you think we should do about it? How do you solve this crisis? Share your thoughts and ideas in the comment section below. Let's have a conversation and work together to create a brighter future for all. But don't worry, if you thought that was all we could do, there is plenty more. We need to work with communities to build resilience to climate change. This includes everything from building seawalls and other infrastructure to protect against sea level rise, to implementing drought-resistant agriculture techniques to help farmers adapt to changing weather patterns. We need to address the issue of overconsumption and waste. The production and disposal of goods and materials is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, as well as air and water pollution. By reducing our consumption and adopting more sustainable production and disposal practices, we can help mitigate climate change. We need to invest in green infrastructure. This includes everything from public transportation to green roofs and walls. By investing in infrastructure that promotes sustainability and reduces emissions, we can create more livable and resilient cities. We need to act now as both individuals and as a society to reduce our carbon footprint, protect natural ecosystems, and build resilience to climate change. Together, we can create a future that is both livable and just. Thank you for watching Proactive Investing.